Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and today I am painting a pair of mermaids for MerMay. Now I have been really inspired by all the people who have been making a mermaid every day or a mermaid every week, and I kind of wanted to join in before this, but with collabs going on and just life being busy, I didn't get around to doing a full-scale mermaid piece until this week. But I'm glad that I took my time and decided to do a big one for this, because I think this is one of the pieces that I'm now the proudest of, alongside other ones I've done, like my sea witch piece that I really like. For some reason, I apparently really like my paintings that take place underwater. It might be because I get to paint really big hair, as you'll see I'm doing now, but possibly also because I find legs a challenge and fins are easier slash more fun to paint. But either way, I am really happy to be taking part in MerMay now, and I had a lot of fun doing this piece and am now very excited to have it as part of my portfolio. I couldn't really tell you what inspired this piece specifically, except I guess I thought, what's better than one mermaid? Two mermaids. So after I had decided I wanted to do two mermaids, it was easy to decide that I wanted them to be good friends and I wanted them to be embracing in some sort of way, because I really like to see mushy feelings in paintings, kind of like the last piece that I did with two figures. I imagine these two have been friends for a long time and have a very special and tight-knit bond, and so I decided to have them twirling their fins together and also be holding hands. And maybe this is them reuniting after time apart, or saying goodbye temporarily, or maybe some part of a dance. I just find female friendships really special and meaningful, and so I really like painting them. So once I decided I wanted them to be mirroring each other, I wanted to come up with a color scheme that would not clash but would also contrast, and while they are mirroring in their pose, I wanted their colors to be quite a bit different from each other. So you can see with the mermaid on the left, I gave her really bright orange and red and yellow hair, which was partially inspired by the Sun Elves hair from The Dragon Prince, which is an animated show on Netflix that I really enjoy, but also just from enjoying contrasting orange and blue, and from wanting to have some really brightly colored magical hair, because I've been doing a lot of semi-realistic hair lately, and like blondes and browns and blacks, and so it was fun to just do crazy mermaid hair. And so to prepare for doing the background, you'll have seen that I did some masking fluid, and I used it properly this time and covered all the things that I wanted to, and it actually worked really well, so I'm really happy with how that worked out. It just made me not have to take such care around like the faces and the hands as I was making this very flowy background. It was nice not to have to make really little jagged marks around the faces to make sure I was going in the right places. So I also put some masking fluid on both of the mermaids' tails, because I wanted to put some lighter decorations on them with a sort of dark, very colored, what's that called? Very pigmented tails. And so I was thinking that just because they don't wear like regular full clothes on their tails, it would make sense that they wear like decorations on their tails, like how humans wear like in their hair. So on one mermaid's tail, I put a bunch of little dots of masking fluid so that I could put sort of bead looking decorations on her tail, and then on the other one I put just swaths so that I could have like a fabric wrap that would wind around her tail and end on her fins with like little beads or something hanging down. And I'm quite pleased with that as well. I'm glad that I took the time to actually plan this out ahead. So this is one of the pieces that I've planned the most, and that I've sat staring at without actually working on it for a lot of time, because I wanted to plan things out and do things in the right order and not get ahead of myself. And I'm glad I did that, and I think it worked out well. I usually do that when I do figures, especially when I do two figures, because it takes extra effort to make sure they're interacting the way that I want them to. So it took a lot of extra time and effort, but I think it was worth it, and I really like how everything turned out. For their tops, I really like to put mermaids in like full top looking outfits instead of the usual swimming suit type things. So I put a flowy green top on my red-haired and tailed mermaid, and then I wanted to have pink on my other mermaid because I wanted to give them clothes that contrasted a lot with their tails. So the green is almost opposite the color wheel from the oranges and the reds, and then the pink is very pastel and I think contrasts a lot with the very dark blue and black of the other mermaid's tail and hair. And so I decided that I wanted to have two different skin tones on these two ladies, and I was also trying to have them have relatively different faces, kind of like what I did with my previous piece with two different characters, but this time I decided to have one have kind of medium tone skin and one have very light skin. So I worked out a couple of different flesh tones, and flesh is one of the few colors that I will actually get out a test piece of watercolor to check the tone of before I put it down, because I think I've talked about this before. Skin is one of those things that like has an actual real color that it should look like, whereas like hair and mermaid tails can be like any variety of red. It doesn't matter because it's not real, but like if you mess up how a skin tone's supposed to look, it's gonna not look right. So I tested both my skin tones and eventually found some that I like. This mermaid on the right went through a very long ugly phase before I actually got her the way I wanted her, because of the nature of how I was working on her face, and that I accidentally made some of the blue from her eye spill over where it didn't go, and because I kept wanting every layer on her face and hair to dry before I worked more on it, ended up with a lot of not great looking until it was totally finished. But in the meantime, I worked on her outfit and decided that I would just go full pretty and gave her some puff sleeves and some embroidered sleeves and made her have lots of pretty pinkness on her outfit, and I really like that. And I also added some details to the other mermaid's outfit, mostly doing a sort of contrast so that the background looked different from her sleeves, so you could see that she had a very floaty sleeve, and then making the part of her shirt that is over her body darker than the rest so that it would look like it was sort of a transparent material that you could see her form and then see the water through. And then I started working on the decorations on both of their tails. So for the orange and green wearing mermaid, I gave her more green and had it be sort of a swirly sort of cloth that was just wrapped around her tail. And then for the dark blue mermaid, I put some more pink that would match her outfit, and also some greens and purples to kind of look like a bunch of multicolored crystals and beads are strung around her tail. And so this piece also took a fair number more layers than some of my pieces that I do. So I did another layer on the tails that I didn't film because it was just the same colors, but blending them more and kind of getting them more heavily pigmented. And it also took a number of layers to get both of them have their hair right. It is fairly normal for me to do a fair number of layers on the faces because those are pretty complicated and have a lot of different shades, because you want to add shadows in certain places and not have harsh lines, but have it so you can see the shape of a face. One thing that I did do differently with this piece that you'll see me do in a little bit is I used paint to do the outlining. So I just filled my brush with a slightly darker shade of whatever color I was outlining and use that instead of a pen, because usually I will use a pen, but sometimes I have a hard time getting a color that goes well with it. So when I use paint, I can customize it. It takes a lot more effort and a lot more care to get the paint to go in the right place, because there's a lot less control than there is with a pen. But I do it every once in a while when I want to be very soft with my outlining. And the last one that I did a lot of outlining like that on was my snow fairy piece that I did like 1.5 years ago. And I really like that. I have to take a little bit of extra time and effort to devote to that when I decide that that's the way that I'm gonna go. And for the mermaid on the right's hair, I wanted her to have curly hair, but I wasn't sure how I was going to have the curly hair float around in the water, because unlike straight hair, it's more likely to be all tangled up with itself and not be able to flow so freely. So I wasn't sure how to get it to be sort of a mass that was together but also sort of floating freely in the water. So I'm not as sure about how her curly hair looks, but I like it pretty well, and I am happy with how it contrasts with her skin and her pale outfit and how it matches nicely with her tail. I also think that it was good when I was working on her face, because I had given her black hair. I was able to give her a dark black eyebrow, and I think that looked really nice with the way the rest of her face was very soft, and it contrasted nicely. And now the final bit, doing the outlining and getting the details of the faces right, was the part where it all came together, and also the part where I could have really messed it up badly, but fortunately I think it turned out pretty good, and you can see the details of their faces, but it doesn't look like, you know, thick outlines like a coloring book. I don't know if you heard all that glumping, but that was my cat jumping into my lap. She likes to do that when I'm sitting at my desk with my laptop, because she can tell she's interrupting my work. So I wanted them to have not too severe expressions, because as usual I like to give my characters fairly soft expressions that aren't too loud or cartoony, because I like to express myself with fairly quiet facial expressions. And so I wanted them to be staring into each other's eyes and looking like they care about each other and are thinking about each other, but not like anything crazy, just a slight smile on their faces, and one with sort of a more confident look and one with a little more worried, strong feelings that she's having maybe a little harder time coping with. And so I had fun doing facial expressions that were slightly different from each other, but that were two people really engaging with each other and communicating just with their faces and their hands that they're holding. So I added some white highlights with a little bit of my gel pens, and I did that in her hair, and then I went over that with some thin black watercolors because I thought that they was standing out too much, so I wanted to kind of soften it down so that her hair wasn't too contrasty with itself. But when I put on the white, I was able to outline the little braid that I wanted to have in her hair, so that was kind of holding back the rest of it from her face. So I was glad I was able to make that like visible, so it didn't just look like a dark blob on top of a dark blob. And then I just added a few highlights to her tail and some of their clothes and their eyes, and that is my mermaid piece. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!